And now we are starting our third panel of today. The panel is called Social Resilience of Europe. Social Resilience of Europe. And let me welcome to the stage our panelists. First of all, Tomáš Petříček, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic, Czechia. Thank you. Hi, Tomáš. And who is now also a director of the Progressive Analytical Center. Second of all, let me welcome Lidia Morawska, who is joining us online. She is a physicist, professor at the School of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at the Queensland University of Technology, director of International Laboratory for Air Quality and Health at QUT. Hello, Professor Morawska.
Good afternoon and good evening from Brisbane. Very nice to be part of this.
Let me also invite Mr. Michał Boni, former Minister of Labour and Social Policy, former Minister of Administration and Digitalization of Poland, former member of the European Parliament. Mr. Boni, I hope you are coming in a second. And let me also welcome, finally, Bart, chair of today's panel, who is a program director of the Warsaw Security Forum at the Pulaski Foundation. Hello, Bart.
I will sit in the middle. Maybe that will actually leave some space for Mr. Boni to come in a second. Oh, yes, he's coming. A highly recognizable person around. So since all of you were already introduced, I'll just give you a second to shake hands and see you around. To anyone who's still having the coffee break, we would be happy to host you here in the room. Take your seat and prepare for the discussion about the things that are happening right now among the societies. Of course, when I woke up today in the morning, the very first message, it was actually about the ICBM, which is not necessarily like a part of our current discussion right now, but it adds up to the whole spectrum of things that we are facing as societies, especially the European societies right now, with the full, I would say, proximity of the war happening in Ukraine, and how much the escalation is also a part of our thinking about the threats to societies. When I think about the resistance, the resilience of societies, I think about not only the ability to respond to the threat, but also to sustain the threat, which presumably, when I look at what happened since 2020, at least in Europe, this is like a chain of events that are only actually rising the stake on our side. I mean, COVID pandemic, later on the war in Ukraine, which is of course still taking place. I was wondering, and there comes actually my first question to you, Mr. Petříček, about what would you make out of the situation where we are right now here in Europe? Looking since the COVID pandemic up until right now, is it actually a chain of positive reaction from the European side? Is it something we should be actually proud of? We were actually resilient to those threats? Or do you think that certain things could have been made better? Maybe we are right now with this escalation letter on the Russian side, not necessarily prepared to the threats that are happening. Over to you.
Good afternoon, dzień dobry. It's a great pleasure to be here in Warsaw, and thank you very much for this chance to speak on an issue which is very close to my heart, social resilience, societal resilience. It's something I'm currently very much devoted to. About whether Europe reacted in a proper way, in the right way to a couple of crises we went through or we are facing right now. I have to admit I have a very mixed feeling about it. First of all, I think that we were able, we have been able to identify what are some of the key problems our society is facing. Be it in the area of security, be it in the area of social cohesion, be it in the area of adaptation to new challenges. At the same time, I see that we are still far from accepting that what we need, if we want a resilient society, is a whole-of-society approach. Because in my view, resilience doesn't mean that you shift responsibility from, let's say, public level, whole of society level, to individuals or individual communities. For example, during the COVID crisis, we experienced that communities across Europe were able to deal and cope with the crisis very well.
Was it communities, was it governments, or was it the European institutions, or every single level?
I think meaning communities, very often what we experienced was that there was an ability of local communities, civil society organizations and initiatives to help each other, to show solidarity and help each other in a moment when some people were very much struggling. But I think that we are not yet there to have a comprehensive plan for strengthening our resilience and applying the whole of society resilience approach. Because in my view, what does it mean? That you need to emancipate people and empower people to be able to face, prepare for potential shocks or crises, and adapt in case that we cannot prevent them. And it means that we cannot use only traditional, let's say, security tools to face these potential shocks or risks. We cannot face climate change impacts with traditional security tools. We cannot face COVID with, let's say, only crisis management tools. What we need is really to look how to empower especially the most vulnerable parts of our society to have the capacity and support to adapt. And it means that we need to look into social area. I'm very happy that we have somebody who is more into this topic than me. We have to understand that it's also about health policy, where we can still do much more in Europe than we are doing right now. We need to look into our education, and on top of it, it's crisis management and security policy as we traditionally understand it.
Allow me to follow up a bit on that. You're saying that we should be empowering societies, we should be empowering certain groups within the societies. Would it be through, I don't know, dissolution of power, or it's rather actually the institutions right now, especially on the European level? Because the response to COVID was actually strengthening the institutions of both state and both on the European level. With what is happening right now, given the security threats, also there is, in my opinion, quite clear trend, we will be discussing about that in a second, quite clear trend to the securitization of policies. So it's like pushing a lot of power into the institutions of both EU and government. So are we actually, when we look at the institutions, are we ill-equipped right now to respond to those threats? That is your feeling? Or should it be actually strengthening institutions, or rather the other way around, giving more power to the people?
I think this is not either one or the other. I think we need to adapt our public institutions to new challenges. Certainly, for example, we need to speak openly about where we are the best place to face a number of challenges we are facing right now. And in my view, we are having a problem that we are facing a wave of sovereignism and nationalism in Europe, while we rather should speak about the solution is at the EU level. For example, in health policy, which is where I'm doing quite a lot of projects right now, we need a European solutions. We need probably more federal Europe in areas like social standards, health policy. There is plenty on the table, from mental health, addictions, access to health care, prevention of serious diseases. This is all making our society more vulnerable if we are not able to solve it without further fragmenting our society, without making more inequalities. And as an overall topic, I see that what makes society less resilient is if you see huge inequalities and if you see trends that undermine social cohesion. And that's what I think it's also bringing the topic to debate also to community level. So that we need to renew the bonds within our societies. The emerging fragmentation between cities and regions, between educated, less educated, between working class and, let's say, more mobile, IT-oriented class today. So there are a lot of trends that actually undermine the resilience of our societies.
Okay, understood. So both level of the institutionals on the at least European level, and then the cohesion of the society. Those are like two solutions from your side. Turning to Mr. Boni. When I was drafting a question to you, I was thinking about what are actually two biggest factors right now when I looked at the political choices of people. And I would say the people are longing for predictability in this era of global challenges. And the second thing is they're longing for security because of the wars, because of COVID prior to that. And basically speaking, like they're making a lot of political choices on the basis of those two things. Of course, our governments, they cherish security very much. This is actually something which brings them to spending money on military things like that. But on the other hand, if they are actually responsible for the future, then they should also take into account the things that are like big trends, such as the development of AI, stuff like that. So introducing some policies, some response that go beyond only security. Is securitization of policy something which you would consider as a threat or as an opportunity for the European Union at this point?
Thank you very much for the invitation and thank you very much for this question. I think that the only way for us, for European, is to combine those two ways, to keep, maintain and develop traditional social cohesion model and traditional European social model, and at the same time to build the new paradigm, new development paradigm based on defense and our future possibilities to be much more powerful when there are some threats, global threats related to Russia or something like that. So I think that this combination requires, firstly, the necessity of redefining some long-term indicators and challenges. Firstly, this is aging society. We need to remember we are the aging society. And it doesn't matter if we are talking about this challenge now or we will talk about this challenge in perspective of 10 years. We will be as a European society, much more aging society in perspective of 10 years. So we need to open the problems of deficits of the labor market, and we need to come back to the rational debate on migration flows. On the one hand, due to international law and rights, and on the other hand, with some analysis, strict rules, but with openness on migrants in Europe. In my view, this is necessary for the future. The second issue is related, as you have mentioned, with technology. Technology game changer, something like that. It's new because in perspective of 5-7 years, for example, probably 61%, due to some experts, of European jobs will be related to artificial intelligence as new models of jobs, yes? What does it mean? It means that we require the new educational policies, addressed not only to the pupils, to school system, but addressed to all people. How to be adaptable to those challenges. Because in my view, this is not only the individual responsibility of workers, of all people. This is not only responsibility of companies. This is a public responsibility. So I think that this kind of adaptability program related to the generative AI revolution should be prepared in Europe and implemented. The third issue, which is important, is innovation. And I think that due to Draghi report, we know, of course, that it requires some activities, financial capital for innovation, not only from state budget, but also from companies. It requires the better network, exchange network between universities and innovation centers and centers of scientific excellence. It requires European cooperation on the science area and so on and so on. And the fourth issue is related to our health. Because I think that due to technology game changer, there are some new opportunities and possibilities for changing the healthcare system, healthcare model. This is also related to the aging society, because for now, just about 30% of people 65 plus need some additional support, yes, with deficits with their mobility, life activity, and so on. So we need to focus on this, and we need to change the paradigm, healthcare paradigm, with focus on prevention and using all technologies to make the health better. Also, it is important when we are thinking about how to convince people that climate changes are very dangerous and that people should be involved in policies and activity related to fight against climate changes. It's their health. Because there are many examples of the negative impact of climate changes on health of people. So if we have this, so I think we need to consider how with those kind of challenges and those kind of challenges to join with security. I will continue in the second round.
In the second round, which would probably be also very much connected to the questions from the audience, because I really want to leave some space also for this thing to happen. But what I take from here, at least from the discussion we had here on the stage so far, is like that we should be caring not only about the institutions, the European institutions, but also the societal cohesion as the basis for the resilience. And that actually, when we even talk about security, and even if we focus on security, there are at least a couple of factors that will be strengthening our societies and our security that are not directly connected to the hard power, but also, connected to economy, innovation, healthcare, etc., which were very much rightfully mentioned by Mr. Boni. And now I turn to our dear guest who's joining us online, a physicist and a professor at Queensland University of Technology, Professor Morawska. The question is actually a bit of a follow-up to what Mr. Boni mentioned. I'm very much used to talking about security only for this hard power perspective, I'll be honest with you. And most of those discussions are, of course, connected to how much percentage we are spending on tanks, on missiles, and things like that. But I absolutely understand that was actually mentioned by Mr. Boni that we should be also caring about other sectors of our not only economy, but of course the well-being and prosperity of our society. That also includes, of course, healthcare and things like air quality and health. In your opinion, in the current state of the discussions that are happening, not only in Europe but also beyond Europe, how can people such as you, as a physicist, the think tankers, the public, introduce or even put more pressure on the issues such as healthcare as compared to the rising discussion related to hard power, things like that? Is it actually something you can convince the politicians to still pick up as the platform for the policies? Over to you.
Thank you very much again for
Could you stop a second, because we don't have sound? Is it okay right now?
sound?
Yeah, please speak up. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Now it's perfect.
All right. Thanks again for having me on the panel and for this good question. We are coming back to this, whether we need to convince the society, policymakers about the importance of air quality, importance of caring for climate. I would have hoped that by now this is a rhetorical question, and the question which is completely answered. We know how much we suffer in terms of health. We see basically every day the impact on the climate. But yes, the fact that we are asking the question is because it is still being asked all the time. So maybe I'll start something one step back when we are talking about air pollution, anthropogenic pollution. Let's one step back about natural air quality and natural environment, because this is often brought in this context. So is natural environment in terms of air quality and support for humans, is it always good? And the question here, it is not. There are lots of pollutants in natural environment which are harmful. For example, radioactive gas radon, which was the topic of my PhD. Desert dust, which affect many parts of the world. There are natural fires, like, for example, in Australia, they are part of the climate here. So this is part of natural environment. This has been created health problems, environmental problems. Were we able to prevent them or do something about this? The point is that in terms of air pollution, for a long time, we didn't really realize that those were problems, like radon is not visible. In terms of desert dust, it was considered that this is part of natural environment. So the risks were not understood. But then came anthropogenic pollution, emissions from burning of fossil fuels, which are having impact on air quality, air we breathe, and on climate. Now again, when we step back, sometime when at the beginning, when it started, when the industrial revolution started, again the risks were not realized. But gradually, we started realizing that there is risk. In terms of air pollution, it was a very eventful December 1952 when the London smoke caused, from retrospective analysis, deaths of 12,000 people, extra deaths. So this was a turning point, a realization, yes, this is a problem, and from then on, very soon, first Clean Air Acts were introduced. Has it completely changed the world? Well, wasn't very proud reading even a few years ago that Krakow was amongst the most polluted cities in Europe. It didn't change immediately because it was still that perception that this is economy, this is progress. I remember the note in Poland when I was growing up, 100 złotych note with chimneys smoking. Well, this was good, this was progress, this was technology. So it was still not changing, not fully realized, but the epidemiology was growing. In relation to climate change, the realization came even earlier. In 1898, the first paper came on this. So, and gradually more and more. So we were aware of the problems. So the question is why why we don't accept, haven't been accepted, or blindly rejected science. And here I'm speaking as a scientist. And the frustration growing in me, the more science I helped to generate, the larger scale this was, the fact that science wasn't used. What's the point in publishing yet another paper if nothing is going to be done about this? And there are two aspects and two elements of this. So one is sort of plainly rejecting science by the government, by intergovernmental organizations, but the other is the complexity of science. So the complexity such that even if a jurisdiction would like to do something, they don't know how to start. So my impact over the last years has been shifting how to address both of this. And interestingly, I found that similar solution works. So in terms of rejecting science, that was my experience at the beginning of the pandemic, where the society plainly rejected that the virus is not airborne. We scientists knew very well and for a very long time that it is airborne. So instead of what was then recommended, cleaning surfaces, we should have ventilation. So what I did, I assembled a large body of scientists. We established scientific consensus about this, and we put pressure on national and international organizations to accept this. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but this scientific consensus worked and helped. The same approach we are now taking in situations of complexity, and in particular complexity when we are talking about indoor air quality and the fact that there's no country yet in the world which has mandated indoor air quality standards. Now, is it easy? It is very complex. It is very complex. It relates to everything. It relates to energy, it relates to buildings, it relates to health. So it is not a simple issue. But again, scientific consensus, which I built with a large group of scientists, is something which appears to be turning the piece. So what I'm saying is we scientists should contribute to this by building scientific-based advice, scientific consensus, which is helping the policymakers. So science-based advice, the problem, the consequences, the solutions which are concrete, doable, meaningful, and accepted by the society. So this is something which I'm finding out as is helping.
Thank you, Professor, which pretty much brings me to the point that we should be doing the evidence-based policy making. I would only hope that this is the case in our societies and also in the European Union, not only in our nation states. Over to you. I open for the panel for the questions from the audience. So if anyone has the question, please raise your hand, state your affiliation, your name, and simply ask the question. Anyone interested? Not at this point. Okay, so I will continue with the discussion here with the panel. Picking up on actually what Minister you said about the response to the securitization, and also what was previously said by Mr. Petříček and Professor Morawska. What I understand here right now is that, of course, we can have a lot of not only political, but also scientific consensus on certain issues. There is, I would say, an understanding among us that, of course, healthcare, things like climate change, they also play a role in terms of security and society resilience. We may even think that, having an innovative economy is a huge plus and something which will be profiting us in the future, but still. We have very tangible things happening right now, very tangible threats. People are asking how many tanks Poland has, how many tanks France has, how many tanks Germany has. I'm still getting back to the securitization of the policy. In the end, a politician would have to make a decision how to split the budget right now. And with a country such as Poland, when you're spending around over 4% of GDP on very pragmatic solutions to this security, you may have a hard time as a politician to answer the question, why do you even care about climate at this point? What would you respond to this kind of the argument coming from the society?
You know, I think that it is necessary to be prepared. And we need to develop defense industries in the European countries. And we need to have financial sources to make it. And we need to have financial sources to make it together in the European Union also, in this budget and probably in the new budget. But the question is how we define the possibility to join using, for example, dual-use models, join some civil goals and military goals. When we are talking about healthcare area, it's possible. When we are talking about communication and telecommunication infrastructure, this IRIS idea in the European Union from satellite signal for internet and so on, we can make it. When we are discussing about the resilience in cities and the civil protection, preparedness to the civil protection, we should do it. So it means that when we are talking about our military and defense challenges, this is not only tanks. For now, I think it's much more important drones and so on. I don't know, of course, but I think that from the perspective of today, the protection of our, for example, energy infrastructure is very, very important, and we need to put the question, if in Poland, if our model of energy and infrastructure of energy infrastructure is defended, we can defend it, or we need to change the model of energy to decentralize energy sources, which is close to green transition, yes, and be much more responsible for the security in the future. So this is coincidence, yes, of those two. And I think that we need to find in the area of security and in the area of social cohesion and our social model, some common areas, some common fields to work together. But what is required? More integrated European Union, leadership in the European Union. This is the real challenge. This is the real challenge. Leadership in the European Union. Third point, the better answer and the better response on disinformation pressures, because disinformation, it's not only disinformation, it's also the tool to polarize societies. It's also the tool which is weaken the democracy. Without democracy, there is no possibility to discuss with societies, European societies, about this combination, security, defense, and the future model answer to the climate. So we need to come back also to conversation with society, to involve society, to build the participatory models. I'm afraid, last sentence, I'm afraid that when we are starting to debate in Europe about military issues, this is only the field for generals and powerful politicians. This is also the area for people, for participation of people, and this participation, this social dialogue, I think, will be very important to prepare us as citizens, as individuals, to react on those threats.
Which lands us quite safely back on the topic of society's resilience, not only tanks and bumps. But what I take from this is that we should not only be spending a lot, but we should be spending in a responsible way. Over to you right now, because and come back to actually the beginning of the discussion about our preparedness and lessons learned from the crises we've been going through throughout last 2 years. Mr. Boni said that we should have a better functioning Europe, in a sense. When you look at the lessons learned throughout the two last years and the trends currently happening. Also with the composition of the new commission, how much of the support it has to get from the rather far-right political part of the European spectre. Are we really better prepared right now after these 2 years?
We are not. And maybe it leads me to your question, tanks and so on. We are not prepared because we don't have capabilities to react, not only in terms of like tanks or military equipment, but infrastructure, institutions. So we are missing on really improving our capabilities to face new threats and new challenges. But it is not enough. You can have the best tanks in the world and in quantity you want, but if you are not able to agree on what is the challenge, what is the threat, you don't know how to use them. So, and here Europe is still far from having a real unified, common strategic view, which is making it weak. And last, and this is also where it leads us back to social resilience, you need also to will. You also need the will to use your capabilities. And that's what makes difference between big powers and fragile societies. Europe is a rich, developed region or continent, able to get the capabilities needed if it reads properly what are the threats, but at the moment it lacks the will to do it and use it. So, and why? Because I think that we are not yet able to bring whole society to agree that we need to understand that the world is changing and we need to mobilize our effort, our energy, our resources in order to protect our way of life and in order to protect also the quality of life we have in Europe. And that's also about parts of society that are most vulnerable, not understanding why they should sacrifice even more if they see at the same time that the social cohesion is weaker and weaker, that there are people who are much better off, not willing to pay the costs of mobilizing our European capabilities in order to react to climate change, in order to react to Russian aggression or risk of disinformation. You cannot ask people who are frustrated, who feels neglected, who doesn't feel that they live decent lives, to sacrifice even more. You need to bring them on board by providing them vision that there is something worth of, let's say, fighting for. There is something worth of protecting for them as well.
And actually, allow me to end on this sentence, because I personally believe that this is the well-structured lesson learned also from the electoral success of President Trump. The last sentence that she said. And I hope that this will be also lesson learned for Europe. Thank you very much. We are on time. Thank you, Professor Morawska, for joining us online. Thank you, Mr. Petříček. Thank you, Mr. Boni, Bart. Hope to see you around. Cheers.